Rohan Mehta and Daniel Brooks were never meant to exist in the same sentence. Yet their lives collided inside a small Brooklyn apartment with deadly consequences. Rohan Mehta, an Indian caregiver chasing stability in a foreign land, trusted the wrong man. Daniel Brooks, a decorated New York firefighter admired for saving lives, hid a secret that slowly turned toxic. What began as comfort and escape became a dangerous web of lies, fear, and control. By the time the truth surfaced, one life was lost, one reputation was destroyed, and a city was left questioning how a hero and a vulnerable immigrant crossed paths in a story that ended in bloodshed. The firefighter had built a reputation that felt unbreakable. For more than a decade, he moved through New York's burning buildings and chaotic emergencies with steady hands and a controlled mind. His fellow firefighters trusted him without question, often placing him at the front during dangerous calls. Captains praised his discipline, and rookies looked to him as an example of what a dedicated public servant should be. In a city where heroes are tested daily, he appeared to pass every test with ease. Outside the firehouse, his life seemed equally ordinary. He lived in a modest Brooklyn neighborhood where people waved politely but rarely asked questions. He kept his apartment clean, followed routines, and avoided the kind of behavior that drew attention. Neighbors saw him leaving early in the morning, returning late at night, and assumed his long hours were part of the job. His calm presence blended into the rhythm of the city, making him easy to overlook. To the public, he represented safety and trust. Parents felt relief when they saw him arrive at emergency scenes, believing their loved ones were in capable hands. His name appeared in local papers after successful rescues, always attached to words like brave and selfless. No one questioned his character because there was no reason to. He had learned how to present exactly what people expected to see. Yet beneath this carefully maintained image was a quiet dissatisfaction he never spoke about. The constant stress of the job, the weight of responsibility, and the loneliness of long nights began to shape his private thoughts. He carried these feelings alone, hiding them behind professionalism and silence. Over time, the gap between who he was and who he appeared to be widened, creating space for choices that would eventually destroy everything he had built. She arrived in New York with a single suitcase and a carefully measured sense of hope. Life back home had offered few opportunities, and becoming a caregiver in America seemed like a chance to support her family from afar. Her days quickly fell into a strict routine of early mornings, long shifts, and quiet nights. She moved through the city almost unnoticed, taking buses and subways filled with strangers who never learned her name. Her work demanded patience and endurance. She cleaned, cooked, lifted fragile bodies, and listened to stories repeated again and again by elderly patients who depended on her completely. The job paid just enough to survive, and most of her earnings were sent overseas. She rarely complained, knowing that many people in her position had it worse. Still, the loneliness followed her everywhere, settling into the small rooms she rented and the silence after work. Being far from home made her cautious. She avoided trouble, kept her documents in order, and trusted very few people. Weekends were spent resting or making short phone calls across time zones, carefully hiding her exhaustion so her family would not worry. The city around her moved fast, but her life felt frozen, caught between responsibility and isolation. When she met the firefighter, it did not feel dramatic or dangerous at first. He seemed different from others she had encountered, carrying confidence without cruelty. His attention made her feel visible in a place where she often felt invisible. For the first time since arriving in New York, she allowed herself to imagine a future that was not defined only by work and sacrifice. That small sense of possibility became deeply important to her, even as unseen risks quietly began to grow. The relationship grew quietly, shaped by secrecy rather than freedom. The firefighter chose locations far from his daily routines, places where he believed no one would recognize him. The Brooklyn apartment became the center of this hidden world, a space cut off from his public life. Each visit felt carefully planned, timed between shifts and family obligations that were never fully explained. What mattered to him was control, and he believed he had it. For the caregiver, the secrecy felt uncomfortable but temporary. She accepted short meetings and long silences, convincing herself that patience would be rewarded. She did not know the full truth about his life, only fragments he allowed her to see. Those fragments were enough to build trust, even as unanswered questions quietly stacked up. She believed that discretion was part of protecting something meaningful. The firefighter began lying with ease. He adjusted stories depending on who was listening, keeping his tone calm and convincing. The habit of deception slowly became routine, no longer causing guilt or hesitation. He saw his double life as a solution to his dissatisfaction, not a problem. In his mind, he was careful, smart, and untouchable. As weeks passed, the balance started to shift. The caregiver grew more attached, expecting clarity and stability. The firefighter felt the weight of her expectations pressing against his carefully constructed walls. What once felt like escape now felt like obligation. He continued visiting the apartment, but the ease was gone, replaced by tension he refused to acknowledge. Neither of them recognized the danger forming between them. The caregiver believed in progress that was never coming. The firefighter believed he could walk away whenever he chose. This mismatch of hopes and intentions slowly poisoned the relationship, turning secrecy into a force that trapped them both, setting the stage for consequences neither had imagined. The first signs of trouble appeared in small, easy-to-miss ways. Messages went unanswered for longer periods, and visits became less frequent. The caregiver noticed how plans were always uncertain, never fixed, always dependent on his schedule. What once felt like patience now felt like being pushed aside. She began to sense that she was living in a space that could be erased at any moment. The apartment changed its meaning for her. It no longer felt like a place of comfort, but a reminder of promises that were slowly fading. She replayed past moments in her mind, searching for signs she might have ignored. Doubt crept in, followed by fear. Being alone in a foreign country made every unanswered question feel heavier. The future she had quietly imagined started to collapse. For the firefighter, the pressure came from a different direction. He felt watched even when no one was around. Every phone notification triggered anxiety. Every unexpected delay raised suspicion. The effort required to maintain his double life began to exhaust him. He worried about mistakes, about slipping stories, about the damage exposure would bring. The apartment that once offered escape now represented risk. His behavior became colder, more distant. He focused on protecting his public image rather than resolving the growing tension. He convinced himself that silence would eventually end the situation without confrontation. Avoidance felt safer than honesty. Each step back, however, increased the caregiver's sense of betrayal. The imbalance between them widened. She wanted certainty, while he wanted distance. Neither addressed the growing gap, allowing frustration to build without release. The unspoken emotions filled the apartment like trapped air, thick and unstable. What had once been secret and exciting was now fragile and dangerous. The illusion holding everything together was cracking, and both were standing too close to the breaking point to escape what was coming next. The night began like many others, quiet and tense, with the city moving on unaware of what was unfolding behind one apartment door. The firefighter arrived, carrying more than exhaustion from work. His thoughts were crowded with fear of exposure and frustration over a situation he no longer wanted to manage. The narrow hallway and dim lighting made the space feel smaller than before, amplifying every movement and every breath. Inside the apartment, nothing felt settled. The caregiver sensed that something was wrong the moment he arrived. The distance between them was no longer subtle. The air was heavy with unresolved emotions that had been building for weeks. The future she had hoped for now felt fragile, slipping further away with each passing moment. The uncertainty pushed her toward desperation, while his fear pushed him toward anger. Stress took control where reason failed. The firefighter felt cornered by expectations he never intended to fulfill. The caregiver felt trapped by dependence on a man who was slowly disappearing from her life. The apartment became a pressure chamber, holding fear, resentment, and panic all at once. There was no escape from the reality they had created together. At some point, control was lost. What followed was sudden and brutal, driven by emotion rather than thought. The small room became a scene of chaos, leaving behind evidence of violence that could never be undone. Blood stained the floor, the walls, and the silence that followed. When it was over, the firefighter stood alone in the aftermath, surrounded by the consequences of his choices. The uniform that once symbolized protection and heroism meant nothing inside that apartment. A life had ended, and with it, the illusion that secrets could remain hidden forever. Outside, the city continued its routine, unaware that a tragedy born from lies had just reached its irreversible conclusion. Morning arrived without urgency, but something felt wrong to the people living nearby. The usual sounds of movement from the apartment were missing, replaced by an unsettling quiet. Neighbors who passed the door noticed nothing at first. Only that time seemed to stretch without explanation. When concern finally led to a call for help, authorities entered the apartment and were met with a scene that spoke for itself. The caregiver was found lifeless, and the evidence left behind showed clear signs of violence. The confined space made it impossible to ignore the intensity of what had happened. Blood patterns, disturbed furniture, and the absence of any sign of forced entry pointed away from a random attack. It was clear that the person responsible had been known to her, trusted enough to be inside without resistance. Investigators moved carefully, documenting every detail. The apartment held traces of a relationship hidden from the outside world. Personal items, phone records, and small details revealed weeks of secret meetings. What initially appeared to be an isolated incident quickly became a case built on deception and betrayal. As news spread, shock followed. The idea that such violence occurred quietly within an ordinary building disturbed the community. The victim's background painted a picture of someone hardworking and cautious, making the crime even harder to understand. There was no history of conflict, no public signs of danger. Attention soon turned to identifying who had last been with her. Digital evidence provided a clear direction, narrowing the search to one person whose public image contrasted sharply with the crime scene. The investigation uncovered a connection that stunned those involved. A respected firefighter, known for saving lives, was now linked to a death that had occurred in silence. The discovery marked a turning point, transforming a private tragedy into a case that would challenge public trust and expose the cost of a hidden life. The arrest sent shockwaves through the city. News outlets moved quickly, placing the firefighter's face beside headlines that felt impossible to believe. The same man once praised for bravery was now described as a suspect in a brutal killing. For the public, the contrast was disturbing. A symbol of safety had suddenly become a reminder of how little people sometimes know about those they admire. Inside the firehouse, disbelief turned into silence. Co-workers struggled to reconcile years of shared danger and trust with the evidence now made public. Stories of rescues and long nights on duty were replaced by questions no one wanted to ask. The uniform that once commanded respect now felt heavy with shame. Administrators acted swiftly, distancing the department from the case while investigations continued. As prosecutors laid out their findings, the firefighter's double life was exposed in detail. Records showed secret visits, hidden communications, and careful efforts to avoid detection. The image of discipline and control collapsed under the weight of documented lies. What emerged was not a moment of madness, but a pattern of choices that steadily led to violence. The caregiver's life was finally seen in full by the public. Her sacrifices, isolation, and quiet resilience became part of the story, correcting the silence that had surrounded her while she was alive. Sympathy grew, but it came too late to change the outcome. Court proceedings moved forward with relentless clarity. Evidence left little room for doubt, and the firefighter's status offered no protection. When a verdict arrived, it marked the end of a carefully constructed identity. The fall was complete. A man once trusted with lives had lost his own freedom, and a city was left to confront the unsettling truth that heroism can sometimes hide profound darkness. The case ended, but its impact lingered far beyond the courtroom. The Brooklyn apartment was eventually emptied, its walls repainted, and its floors replaced, yet the memory of what happened there refused to fade. For the community, the crime became a quiet warning about the dangers hidden behind ordinary doors. People who had once passed the building without thought now remembered it as the place where a secret life turned deadly. The caregiver's absence left a painful void. Her family received answers, but no sense of closure. The life she built through sacrifice and endurance ended far from home, reduced to headlines and court documents. Her story exposed how vulnerable isolation can make someone, especially in a country where support systems are fragile and trust is hard to build. The firefighter spent his days confined, stripped of the identity that once defined him. The respect, purpose, and pride attached to his work were gone. In their place remained the reality of irreversible choices. His case became a lesson studied by professionals who examine how stress, secrecy, and entitlement can combine with devastating results. For the public, the story challenged comfortable assumptions. It reminded people that uniforms and titles do not guarantee character and that private decisions can undo public good. The tragedy was not born in a single night, but in a series of moments where honesty was avoided and responsibility ignored. In the end, there was no redemption, only reflection. A woman seeking stability lost her life, and a man trusted to protect others destroyed his own future. The story closed without justice feeling complete, leaving behind a lasting reminder that when lies replace truth, the consequences are often written in blood and silence.